and welcome along to another episode of our stadium review series, Review the 92. Each week, for those of you that haven't seen, myself and Tom review a ground from the English Football League, talk about our experience there and rank it in certain key areas. So after a trip down to Pompey last week, we're coming a little bit more local this week and we're going to face QPR, which we went to earlier this season. But Loftus Road, a bit of an old school ground, and we'll talk about it in detail today. And unfortunately, I think the bad might outweigh the good even. But let's talk first about the stats, which is what we always do. The Kiyan Prince Foundation Stadium, as it's now called, the biggest positive it's got. The capacity of the ground, which was opened in 1904, is 18,439. However, the record attendance, like most of the grounds we've had so far, particularly the older ones, is a standing attendance. And that, even for the little Loftus Road, is 35,353, which was against Leeds in the 1970s. The all-seater attendance capacity, record attendance, is 19,002. That was against Man City in 1999. However, we went on the 14th of September 2019 when we thought the season would be finished and we thought the Euros would be finished at this point. And we were hopeful of a good season with Luton. And that may be back on the cards as we record this. Just after Hull have lost 1-0 to Luton, which is why I'm a complete mess, because I'm very excited. Tom, your initial thoughts on the Kiyan Prince Foundation Stadium before I ramble on anymore.
Yeah, as you were saying about the bad outweighing the good, I was thinking the one thing that I'll give credit to is that they gave the naming rights of the stadium to a good cause. So we'll applaud them for that. Yeah. But apart from that, it wasn't the best match day experience, was it? How it's organised, the setup of the setup at the ground, squeezing you in a very narrow corridor behind at the back of the stand. I'm sure anyone that's been to the stadium can relate to this. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a warm day as well, so September, it's not the best, quite a sweaty place to be, if I remember rightly. Yeah. And so, it's quite a local one, so a lot turned up. For some reason, I think it's a bit of a derby. There's a bit of bad blood between the clubs. Yeah. I don't really understand why.
I mean, the most recent thing I knew was the Tony Thorpe thing, but there obviously was a bit of bad blood before there, and it's now probably, as they said last week when the return fixture was, the battle of the plastic pitches. So
I quite like that, yeah. Your mate Tony Thorpe, is it? It's kind of weird. I remember, so we were the top tier, and were there any Luton fans in the bottom tier?
Yes, so both tiers. Oh, that will come into our value section.
Okay, but I just remember feeling like you had no sense. We were almost at the very front, weren't we? We were the second row.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had no sense of if there was anyone below me. It's kind of very sheer, the drop, and you couldn't. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I just felt it's quite unusual.
Well, it's a sort of old school stand, isn't it? The top tier it's not like one of the modern stadiums where it sort of goes back diagonally. The top tier was directly above the bottom tiir. It's so you can't see what's below you, essentially.
That's what I was trying to say, but I couldn't get my words right. Yeah, basically, you're in a box, and whereas it should go like that, and you can get more of a sense of what's happening. You'd have to look down and to see who's below you, and I don't think I've ever been in a ground like that before. That's quite unique. And we were quite near the QPR fans again. Yeah. Like that corner there, weren't we? So, yeah, what were your thoughts on the ground?
The ground itself, I guess there's two things I need to separate throughout this episode. Is once I was in my seat, I really liked the ground. Everything outside of my seat was bordering on horrendous. That would be my experience of the ground. Because once you're in your seat, it's actually one of the classic old school stadiums that you'd love to sit in, that we talk positively about. But the organisation and getting to it is all over the place, isn't it?
And there were clashes outside the ground beforehand, weren't there? And it wasn't the best to organise. But I agree with that. It's not all negative. The seat, had a good view, and it is four stands, got history. So we're not totally laying into it. I've got some good things to say about it as well.
And obviously for me, I've got to bear in mind things like it's not a million miles from Westfield, and we had a lovely Mexican lunch, which I have to bear in mind. Negatives obviously will be ticket pricing, which we'll come on to. And to be fair to the nearly 3,000 Luton fans that were there, a fair few left at half-time due to the performance, I think you'll remember at the time.
Did they?
Which I think it was the first Graham Jones disaster on the road. I think it would be fair to say. They were 3-0 down half an hour.
I don't know how you say his name, Eze.
Yeah, so he scored like in the first couple of minutes from a silly goal, and he ran the show that day. He was unbelievable, and
he did not look like a Championship player, or maybe he was Championship level, and Luton just looked like League One. Maybe
potentially
that's the difference. A league apart.
Maybe he looked Premier League and they looked League One, which was possibly the biggest issue that
Two
day.
leagues apart, yeah.
And Naki Wells got a brace as well, so obviously some decent names there at QPR at the time. But for Luton, it was a bit of a strange day, but we're here to talk about our experience of the ground. So we will start, as we always do, with atmosphere. And I think that's probably one of the areas, again, once the game started, that I couldn't really rank down hugely. It's not a modern bowl. It's close into the pitch, a bit like our home Kenilworth Road. And you feel every bit of the fans, I guess, hostility. When they're behind the team, you feel every bit of that, which is what you want as a football fan. Yeah,
100%. As I just said, we did see a bit of some clashes between the sets of fans and the police before the game, so there was already a bit of growing, and we were positioned right next to the home support, and they did go 3-0 up. So yeah, they were jubilant in the first half, and then Luton rallied in the second half. So we started getting excited, and the atmosphere was good.
And it was a grand slam finish, wasn't it, as a game?
Yeah, Luton could have got a point, couldn't they, really? So yeah, that would, and I think it would have gone mental in the away end, obviously, had they got the point. So yeah, it was building up to a great, it was a good atmosphere. I think I'll start off with a 8 for that. I'm gonna give it an 8.
That's the number I had, to be honest. It can't be ranked lower because it has all the things I want. It's close to the pitch. We were probably closer to the to the home fans than we've been at most grounds, because the distance between the stands, particularly those top tiers, you could physically probably stretch your arm out, the pair of you, and be almost touching. It's that close. And I really liked it, the atmosphere. I like that style of ground. I like how it's laid out, and it led to a great experience. So I'll match you with an 8. Moving on to location after our agreement on the first one, and this is where it's a little bit mixed. So in terms of the location generally, for us in Luton, it's easy to get to. There's transport links to London. It's in a fairly, I don't want to say residential area, so it's easy to get to. It's got good links, even within London and tube stations. For us, obviously, you had a friend who was living in London locally, so we sort of detoured a little bit to our normal route, and all of that was fine. However, it's something you've alluded to already. Just outside the ground is probably, I would argue, poor police management, knowing what you would expect between the two teams. I'm not saying it's the police's fault. It's not. But we're having the same conversation as Charlton, which was about the sort of the policing style in London, which I don't think helped to the situation. And we mentioned it at Charlton, so I'm not going to go over it all again. But I think it would be fair to say it escalated more quickly than it needed to.
Yeah, again, we'll just be rehashing the same conversation we already did have. But yeah, I don't know if it's just a coincidence. I don't think it is that we went to Charlton in the April and QPR in the September, so just a few months apart. And I'm not saying there was people with blood pouring out of their heads left on the floor, but they were.
It was fisticuffs, if nothing else.
The biggest clashes I probably have seen at football games, I would say, and I don't know what the reason is behind that. So whether it's poorly organised or the fans playing up because it's a big trip into the capital, you can decide. But yeah, I don't know. It wasn't the best organised.
That's fine. Yeah, I agree with that, to be fair. But aside from that, location-wise, I think it's pretty good, to be honest. You can't ask for much more than being in a very easy to reach part of London, with restaurants around, with high streets around. There's not a great deal people can complain about for that. So what would you give it overall?
Yeah, I think you're right. As you said, we went to Westfield for lunch beforehand. Very nice set out, warm weather.
Yeah.
Shepherd's Bush. It's well connected. Yeah, it's not a pain to get to at all. I think I'll be generous and give it an 8 again.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I was and ahhing with to give it a 7 was the fact that there was probably about a 20-minute walk, and you know what I'm like with that. But let's not be unkind today. Luton have won. I'm in good form, so we're going to go for an 8 out of 10.
Good. I'm just trying to think of the route.
We walked through a little alleyway and loads of houses and streets and weird bits, and then down an A road. But it wasn't hard at all. There was no hills. There was no nothing.
Do you remember what train station we used, or tube station?
Oh, you're pushing me now.
I think we walked to Shepherd's Bush after it. I don't know. Yeah, it's well connected.
Yeah,
no problem.
There's nothing people can complain about there.
any fan listening to this that's planning a trip to Loftus Road will find it quite straightforward, I'm sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And we move on to value. And this is where my ratings, I'm afraid, start to plummet, despite it being the capital. It is quite an old school ground. It is in the capital, and I have to bear that in mind. We sat in the top tier, as you mentioned, because it was the cheaper of the two. It was £28. However, the lower tier was between £31 and £33. Now, what I'm trying to base that on, and it will come down to character probably where we talk about it, is the experience of being in the ground and trying to get out the ground, because that contributes towards your ticket value. And the fact that you could argue, yes, we were in the stadium for an extra hour, but I don't think that it was an hour most people wanted to be in there. So for the value of what you got in terms of as an experience, in terms of ease and convenience, I don't think it's good at all, to be honest.
No, and I think we didn't talk about that, did we?
No.
How we were kept behind after the game.
Well, we weren't actually kept behind physically. I mean, there's one entrance for anyone who's going in the away end for the top tier and the bottom. There's one entrance on the right hand side of each where you go in. We were all the way over by the left corner flag, as you mentioned, so we were walking all the way along. And after the game, there's one walkway that probably at a push can hold 3 or 4 people width-wise, and there's there's half of 2,800 people trying to get out. So
I thought I was under the impression the police had said away fans can wait so we don't have any more clashes after the game.
No. It was open to go out within 5 minutes of the game. It's just that there was that many people, 3 width-wise into 1,500. It's going to be a while, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I know there may have been little problems outside that possibly delayed things we wouldn't have seen because we were stuck in there. But I guess the one bit I want to point out of that, adding to value as well, is that then when we couldn't get out and we were just standing still for half an hour, it was boiling hot. We were standing up, we were knackered. We just went and sat back down in some of the empty seats in the stadium because everyone had gone. And the stewards came along and said, out you go, it's clear now. And we walked out and we were stood in the same place for another 25 minutes. And all we were actually doing is getting in the way of the QPR staff who were trying to clear like the rubbish and the bins and the food kiosks and all of that sort of stuff. So that again was poor organisation. But I contribute that towards the value because that's part of my experience is being home within a reasonable time afterwards.
Yeah, you're right. It was like they just wanted their shift to pass as quickly as possible so they wouldn't let us back in the seats. But really, it was, I think from our point, it was a sensible thing to do. The queue wasn't going nowhere and it was hot and quite claustrophobic. We're just sat and we're happy to wait on the seat, but they weren't having it. So yeah, it's again poorly run. And you're right, that's part of it when you're paying. I'm going to give it a 5, I think, for value. Maybe that's generous, £28 for the cheaper ticket. 4. I'm giving it a 4. Talk myself into it.
Good lad. The only thing I was going to say is the thing that really annoyed me with that is that there was another exit at the end we were at, but they wouldn't open it. And I'm guessing that wasn't the club's decision. It was probably a policing thing. But it didn't help, is all I'm going to keep saying on that. So I'm a bit like you. I'm torn between 4 and 5, but I can't give it higher than a 4 because it meant we didn't get out of the ground until nearly 6 o'clock. And I get it's an old school ground. It's got constraints in the way it's made, but it could have been done better. And considering it's one of the most expensive that we've been to this season, I don't think that was reflected, despite the ground itself being nice.
No, they're Premier League prices as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
When you get into I know we didn't pay it, but when you're getting up to mid-30s, that's not good.
Well, your friend who bought a ticket later on, his was in the 30s then. So one of our party did.
Yeah, not good.
And then finally is character, which I think it will be a little bit of a redeeming feature for it because we always talk about this. The modern bowls are a little bit of a difficulty for us. We like 4 old school stands, corners not filled in. You can see out, you can see past the stadium. You've got old school character, even walking around the ground. It felt old school. It was in a residential area. I don't think there are many negatives in terms of character. While there may not have been something completely outstanding, you've even mentioned something unique about the stand that we were in terms of the away end. There's something we've not experienced before. So it's got quite a lot going for it here, I think.
See, I'm not sure if you can see out past the corners. I think it is like a box more than a bowl. So it's like a very rectangular shape.
Yeah, sort of.
But you can't, they are closed in, I think, which is, again, makes it, as far as I'm concerned, quite a unique ground in its layout.
But I guess for us, we could see over still, couldn't we? If nothing else.
See over, and I like that. Yeah, I like the fact you could see over it, but I don't think you could see past it, which is a bit different actually, because you wouldn't call it a bowl by any stretch of the imagination,
Oh,
but
God,
it wasn't the. I don't think this. I mean, I might be wrong here. Someone will correct us in the comments maybe, but I don't think the stands are really separated. I think they almost like, yeah, literally like a rectangular box.
Yeah.
So I do. Yeah, I do like the ground actually.
It was definitely unique, and that's what we normally look for in character. And it wasn't unique bad, I don't think.
No, and as you said, I did make that point that I've never really been in the top tier and not been able to see below what's happening, and that's just a bit different. Yeah, I'll give it, without having any defining features, again, that you wouldn't say, have you ever seen that at Loftus Road? Like, it's lacking that. I'll give it a 7. Play it safe with a 7, I think, for character.
Well, I didn't expect today to finish the episode more generous than you on QPR, but I'm gonna sneak an 8 for character because I really, as I said, once I was in my seat, I really loved the stadium. I really loved the football, the 90 minutes. I loved the atmosphere and I loved the experience and the character of that. However, it's just the rest of the things that are clouding my judgment. But if I'm judging it purely on the 90 minutes of watching football, that's one of the better vantage points I've had this season.
Would you be in a rush to go back?
Only if I could sit on the other side, which was closest to the exit.
And just have 85 minutes run out.
If I knew I was at the other end and I was going to be in the queue for 5 minutes, I'd be fine. But the fact that we were right at the far end and sat there for 40 or stood there for 40 is the thing that annoyed me the most. And I don't think I should judge the whole experience on that.
Well, as they almost definitely will be in the same division next season, it's a question you'll have to face.
So hopefully, by the time we record next week's episode, we will be able to confirm that. And hopefully, we won't be in the same league as next week's opponents instead.
God willing, as Nathan Jones would say.
And that is it for this QPR episode. If you did enjoy it, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe for a weekly episode from this series, as well as daily FM20 content. And of course, if you've been to Loftus Road, particularly as an away fan, let us know what you think and any different experiences you had to us. I'd be interested to know if you had a different route of getting out to what we did. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you to Tom, my co-host, for joining me as always.
Cheers, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.